Hanoi Sky, 1965. American squadrons roared through a long line of gleaming metal. Jet engines thundered like rolling thunder itself. They carried bombs and target lists. They also carried the belief that air power would force the enemy to capitulate. Below them, rice paddies and red dirt roads lay quiet. On the ground, everyday life seemed to continue as if nothing had changed. But above the bombs and orders, an invisible predator was watching. An electronic eye cold and merciless. It was not a gun or an interceptor stalking them. It was the Fansong radar SNR-75, the fire control radar for the SA-2 guideline. When it locked onto a target, the signal was not a red dot on a map. It was an execution order. An SA-2, nearly 10 meters long and weighing close to 2 tons, would climb out at over 3 times the speed of sound. It tore through the air to find the aircraft it had been pointed at. Pilots rarely saw their enemy. They only heard warning tones in the cockpit. ARA haw, then RWR dry and sharp. Those sounds signaled that the countdown for survival had begun. Operation Rolling Thunder kicked off in March 1965 with a clear ambition. The goal: use air power to destroy North Vietnam's industrial and military capacity and force Hanoi to negotiate. But the sky was no longer empty playground for aircraft. Soviet-supplied SA-2 systems turned key approach routes into traps. Each battery was an integrated system: radar controllers and missiles Fansong detected and designated. The SA-2 turned that designation into an explosion. From the ground, white vapor trails climbed along flight paths. They often ended in an orange flare against a gray sky, cold, precise, impersonal. In the first year alone, loss rates spiked. At one point, reports recorded as much as 5.7% of missions failing to return. F-4, Phantoms and F-105 Thunder Chiefs. The pride of the U.S. Air Force went down. They broke apart over fields or became small dark specks in binoculars. Returning pilots offered a blunt confession. We didn't know what was shooting at us. When the radar locked, we were out of time. U.S. units tried everything flying low to hug the ground, clutter-changing ingress routes, deploying ECM to jam signals. But North Vietnam, with Soviet advisors' help, adapted. They hid radars in villages, on hills and forests. They switched them on and off, in a few beats moved quickly, forcing the opponent to chase an electronic shadow that was always changing shape. At desks in the Pentagon and at forward command posts, a hard conclusion formed. The U.S. had the fastest aircraft. Its pilots were among the toughest trained, but they faced an enemy that bombs and skill could not touch a network of air defense radars. One general put it bitterly: "We can evade, but we cannot strike the radar." That was the indictment that forced a change in operational thinking. The proposal bait the radar so it would reveal its source, then fire anti-radiation missiles to destroy the emitter. It sounded like a suicide mission, but it was the only door to force the Fansong into the open. The idea demanded changes in both men and machines. Pilots would not just fly, they would read signals and decide in seconds between life and death. There was no middle ground act or disappear from the sky. Out of that paradox, a new program was born: Wild Weasel. The name sounded like a joke, a small, daring weasel crawling into a snake's den, but it marked a turning point. Instead of running from the electronic eye, men would lure it to look directly at them, then break it. Between the white plumes of SA-2s and the warning tones in cockpits, a reverse hunt began. In the cockpit of an F-105, not yet painted with squadron markings, 2 men watched white vapor trails rise from the ground. Captain Jack Turner. The pilot gripped the stick in silence. First Lieutenant Tom Miller, the electronic warfare officer, was writing Fansong frequencies into a notebook. They did not yet know that months from now, they would be selected for the Wild Weasel mission, the craziest experiment in the history of aerial combat. But the trap over Hanoi had begun to tighten. Would this idea save formations, or only add another line to the casualty list, Peace 2? In October 1965, in a stifling conference room at Eglin Air Force Base, Florida, U.S. Air Force officers sat around a table, faces drawn. Before them lay the proposed plan: an almost suicidal effort to neutralize North Vietnam's air defense network by striking straight at the radar sources. The codename Wild Weasel sounded like a joke on paper, But to the men in the room, it was the only bold option that might break the deadly trap over Hanoi. When the technical officers presented the idea, the room fell silent and then erupted in sardonic laughter. A veteran pilot with salt and pepper hair sneered, "Who goes out to be bait so the radar will lock on their head? Want to die early." In a rear row, Jack Turner sat up straight. He had seen Fansong radar lock onto his comrades in North Vietnam. Beside him, Tom Miller nodded slightly. Both understood if no one tried, American bombs would keep falling into the kill zone. The plan sounded simple, but reckless. Equip with an RHAW warning receiver to detect Fansong frequencies. Then mount the AGM-45 Shrike anti-radiation missile, a weapon that could home in on the radio emission to destroy the source. An engineer shook his head. Let the radar lock you, and then you lock onto it. Sounds like digging your own grave. Another pilot snorted. So I have to slow down loiter right in front of an SA-2's nose and hope your new missile works. You gotta be shot and me. In the corner of the room, Captain Jack looked down at the plan. He was thoughtful. He understood better than most what it felt like to be locked onto by something you could not see. That curse quickly became an unofficial motto, YGBSM. Both fear and defiance how they face death. The two-seat F-100F Super Sabre was selected for the role. The experimental RHAW system could detect radars at roughly 50 miles. On the wings, Shrike small but fearsome enough to make the enemy wary. The Wild Weasel mission was simple and terrible. Fly straight into the danger zone at a few thousand feet, deliberately trigger the Fansong to act as bait. It was a shootout in which the adversary fired faster and without aiming. In the few short seconds when the radar locked, the crew had to read the signal launch a Shrike and get out before an SA-2 climbed. Though the chance of survival was nearly nil, the program was approved. The first pilots chosen were selected not only for skill, but for steel nerve. They would fly into the kill zone, so those behind them might get home. At the end of 1965, the first F-100F took off from Korat. Jack and Miller were on that flight. They knew clearly if the idea failed, they would be the first to pay. Late 1965 F-100F Super Sabres began taking off from Korat and Takli. They were the Wild Weasel testbed, carrying both hope and dread. Every mission was a wager with life. The first weeks proved that more brutally than anyone had predicted. The F-100F quickly revealed its limits. It lacked the speed range and armor to survive inside a dense air defense envelope. The AGM-45 Shrike, the first anti-radiation weapon, had its own flaws. Its effective range was only about 16 to 25 kilometers, and it depended entirely on a continuous radar signal. North Vietnam learned that fast switch the Fansong on for a few seconds to lock, then shut it off. The Shrike lost its track, wandered off, or fell harmlessly. An officer at Takli sneered, "You're putting bait in the snake's mouth, but there's no venom yet?" The early weeks were a string of bitter failures. Many pilots and WSOs were shot down. The F-100F was too slow to escape once an SA-2 climbed. A survivor put it bluntly, when the RHAW screams you have seconds. Either launch the Shrike at the right moment or you die. Internal reports showed that after 10 missions, survival rates plunged proof of the price the program paid. But from the wreckage, valuable data gradually emerged. RHAW captured signal samples, letting them understand the radar's operating rhythm and leading to a key lesson: to defeat a radar, you must understand it. The bold pilots slowly became electronic warfare specialists. They learned to read frequencies and anticipate the instant the Fansong would emit. It's like playing chess with an invisible opponent, one WSO said. Failures forced the Air Force to act. The F-100F was replaced by a more capable airframe. The Shrike was refined after each sortie. Technical manuals grew thicker with every weasel that didn't come home. In the Korat briefing tent, the smell of cigarette smoke and sweat mixed as Miller bent over a paper crammed with radar frequencies. "Next time it'll fire here, we go in 20 seconds earlier." Jack nodded a pencil still tucked behind his ear. Outside, F-100F engines spooled up again. They still took the risk, but this time they carried more data and were a little less blind about the thing aiming at them. In 1966, the Wild Weasel program turned a new page, putting the bloody days of failure behind it. From the bases at Korat and Takli in Thailand, F-105F, Thunder Chief's nicknamed Thud, began to take off. This was the technical answer to the earlier string of losses, a machine fast and tough enough to confront the SA-2 air defense network head-on. By 1967, the F-105G Wild Weasel III emerged a true radar hunter. It was fitted with more sensitive RWR-improved AGM-45 Shrikes and could carry bombs to strike SAM sites directly. With speeds approaching Mach 2 and superior resistance to air defense fire, the F-105G became a counterweapon worthy of the task. For the first time, they had something able to take on the fan song. Along with it came a tactical turning point, bait and kill. A pair of weasels acting as hunters would fly low and slow, deliberately drifting into the radar sweep. When the fan song keyed up, the raw system immediately pinpointed its location. Behind them, a pair of killers would lie, in wait to launch Shrikes. If the radar went silent, the SAM battery was blind. If it kept transmitting, it became a perfect target. "We turned the radar into the delivery man of its own death," one pilot said. The tactic required absolute second-by-second coordination. The daring hunter flew at a few thousand feet between the web of 37mm and 57mm fire. The killer trusted its wingman's signal, ready to fire the moment coordinates were given. The RHAW screamed. "Fan song 305, Jack barked over the radio. Miller glanced at the lights and hit the button. A Shrike left the wing, leaving a white trail aimed straight at an invisible bright spot ahead. 3 seconds of silence. Then a fireball rose from the ground. Hit. Doubts about the doctrine began to fade. They knew this time they would live. They also worked closely with the F-105D bomber formations trailing behind. Those formations only waited for the door to be opened. The radar hunters had turned Hanoi's skies into a place where human ingenuity outmatched technology. A typical mission the hunter triggers. The fan song, the killer fires a Shrike to silence the radar. Immediately after, the F-105D squadron would rush in to strike Ham Rong Bridge or the Yen Pu power plant. If the radar stayed alive, the F-105G would dive in and deliver bombs itself. "We were the ones who opened the door," one pilot said. "Without us, no one could get into Hanoi." The results came quickly. In 1966, Wild Weasel began to make a clear mark. At least 15 fan song sites were destroyed. Dozens of SA-2s were neutralized. Bomber loss rates fell from 5.7% in 1965 to under 2% by 1967. North Vietnam responded by moving batteries constantly and camouflaging them more carefully. They even erected fake radars to fool Shrikes. Wild Weasel answered with upgraded RWR and new Shrike variants, significantly reducing the risk of losing a target. That daring turned Wild Weasel from a paper joke into legend. The quip, "You gotta be shitting me," yielded to respect. When we saw a pair of weasels up front, we knew we had a chance to come home, an F-105D pilot recalled. But the cost remained heavy. Many F-105G pairs never returned. Only cold reports remain lost contact after a radar signal. Over Hanoi's skies, amid smoke fire and electronic signals, the hunt had reversed. P5. From 1967 onward, the air defense pressure around Hanoi kept tightening. By the time of linebacker Spanian's 1972, that sky had become a deadly maze where radars, guns, and missiles wove together into a dense web. The Wild Weasel pairs were always the openers, leaving the runway before everyone else. When the RWR screamed, there was no time to hesitate. Radar active. Bearing 270. The hunter pilot's voice echoed over the radio. The killer pair behind immediately launched a Shrike, then dropped low to dodge fire amid the thick barrage of North Vietnamese defenses. Among them, Major Leo K. Thorsness became the embodiment of the first in last out spirit. On April 19, 1967, he led a mission into Hanoi, destroyed a SAM site, shot down a MiG-17, and was later shot down himself, spending 6 years as a prisoner of war. His actions saved the formation behind him. During Linebacker 2, within the first 20 minutes, Weasel squadrons destroyed 3 radar stations and 4 SAM batteries, cutting B-52 losses to below 1%. Each time a fan song exploded, it was not just a tactical victory, it was a breath of relief for dozens of pilots flying through the firestorm behind them. P6. Thanks to the first and last out missions, the U.S. Air Force transformed tactics and technology, turning radar from a shield into a mortal weakness. That crazy idea gave birth to SEAD's suppression of enemy air defenses, the backbone of modern air combat for more than half a century. Wild Weasel's success began with revolutionary technical improvements. First came the radar warning receiver, RWR, the electronic eye that evolved from RHAL on the F-100F and F-105G. The RWR could read frequencies and bearing, allowing a pilot to detect a radar in seconds, even amid electronic clutter. That display was like a second instinct for us, one pilot said. When it lights up, you know someone is looking straight at you. Alongside it came new anti-radiation missiles. In 1968, the AGM-78 Standard Arm appeared, with roughly twice the range of the Shrike and a warhead about twice as heavy. Thanks to its signal memory, it could continue to chase a target even if the radar went silent. An engineer laughed and said, "The radar thinks it's safe when it shuts off, but the arm remembers where it was." The kill rate against Fansong rose from about 20% to nearly 40%, and each time a radar keyed up, it effectively self-identified. When North Vietnam employed jamming, the U.S. countered with home-on-jam techniques, homing on the jamming signal itself to find the emitter. The electronic smoke the enemy created became unintentionally a target map. They thought they were blinding us, an engineer at Eglin recalled, but actually they were flipping on a light that showed us where they stood. Those advances crystallized into SEAD doctrine. From Linebacker onward, no major campaign began without first blinding the radar eye. From Hanoi to the Gulf, the principle remained the same: to strike the target, you must neutralize what is looking at you. P7. More than 100 Wild Weasel pilots and WSOs lost their lives during the Vietnam War. That number, though cold on paper, can't tell the story of the empty cockpits or of the aircraft that vanished into the forests of the North. Many were never found. Each mission was a gamble where the stakes were life itself. When the RWR screen flashed signaling that a Fansong had locked on, the pilot knew that, in just a few seconds, an SA-2 would be climbing toward him. "You hear the RWR tone, and you know you're being hunted," one survivor said quietly as if the memory still weighed on him. In the 60 minutes of a typical sortie, they had to fly low, exposed to the air defense fire. They deliberately provoked radar locks to fire their Shrike or Standard Arm. If the radar stayed silent, the mission failed. If it switched on, they became the target. "We had to fly that way so the guys behind us could make it home," one WSO said. The story of Wild Weasel is about young men, ordinary people facing extraordinary trials. They carried dreams of families and life after the war, yet chose to fly into the fire not for glory, but because they believed they could make a difference. One pilot asked why he kept flying, when the survival rate was only about 50%. After 100 missions, simply answered, "If not me, then who?" That question haunts every generation of Wild Weasels. Alongside Thorsness were others whose names are less often spoken. Captain Merlin Dethlefsen, who in 1967 pressed through anti-aircraft fire to destroy 2 SAM sites, saving the formation behind him, and was awarded the Medal of Honor. Captain Ronald Haidt flew more than 50 missions before being shot down and declared missing. They fought not only bombs and missiles, but also the fear within their own minds. It was their sacrifice that built the Wild Weasel legacy. Because of them, loss rates in campaigns like Linebacker were nearly cut in half. And because of them, bomber crews men they never met had a chance to come home. The story of the radar hunters is not just about electronic warfare, it's about humanity, courage, and belief. "We weren't heroes," one pilot said, a faint sad smile on his face. "We were just doing our job." P8. History has proven that the Wild Weasel pilots, through courage and intellect, broke the North Vietnamese air defense network and laid the foundation for an air combat doctrine that changed the world. From Hanoi to the Persian Gulf, Iraq, and Syria, that legacy remains. The F-4G, EA-6B, and F-16CJ still carry the DNA of the Weasel, detecting, locking, and destroying radar with near-perfect precision. Each time a HARM missile leaves the rail, it serves as a silent reminder of lessons once written in blood. Wild Weasel not only created SEAD suppression of enemy air defenses, but also redefined how humans confront technology. They turned radar from hunter into prey, and in that reversal, Human ingenuity triumphed over the machine. Their true strength did not lie in firepower, but in the belief that even the impossible could be broken. They dared to dream, to act, and to take the first hit so that others could find their way home. The burned frame of a fan-song antenna lies silent by the dike. Where radar once saw everything, now only twisted steel remains.